I don't think I need a microphone, so I'm not going to put one up. I tend to get in trouble with microphones, so keep on going. So yeah, hope y'all having a great conference. I'm really glad to be here, as I said this morning. And I have had the pleasure or pain of taking a whole lot of different certification exams. I've taken Microsoft certification exams, CompTIA certification exams. I took the Floodplain Manager certification exam. I had that one. I let it lapse at the end of last year because I wasn't doing any floodplain management. So I've done a lot of these exams. And what I found in going through the process is that a lot of the way they do these things is very similar. Maybe it's because now we have standards for certification. I don't know. But I've developed some tips and tricks in going through these that I would like to share with y'all as you're considering the GISP or maybe one of the Esri certifications or ASPRS or any of the other ones out there. So one thing I do want to quickly, I know Rebecca hit this, but I'm going to hammer it in again. Because every year I do a GIS certification survey. Just try to see what's the state of acceptance within the industry of that certification, be it technical or professional or whatnot. And invariably I get people that say, yes, I have my certification because I graduated from so-and-so college. Or, yeah, I'm a licensed surveyor, I have my certification. So there's obviously a misunderstanding of what certification is versus having a certificate versus a license. So I really want to push this home. A certification is typically a voluntary thing that you do to enhance your career and your profession. It is managed by typically a third party that sets the rules and requirements to attain that certification. It's not usually a requirement under the law to practice in a certain field to have the certification. It's just in many cases preferred, like planning. It's very hard to get the job as the city planner or the county planner if you don't have the ASCP. It's not that there's a legal requirement to have that at the state level or whatever, but it's just one of those expected credentials. Okay? Licensure, that is a state regulatory requirement. If you want to practice surveying, since that's what we'll be hearing about in a little bit, you have to have a license that's issued by the state. The state determines what are the requirements to earn the license. They determine what the minimum practice requirements are. How do you lose the license? What happens if they set all that stuff up? It's all part of the law. Okay? Whereas a certificate is saying you completed some course of training. That could be a 2-year program. That could be a 4-hour webinar. Right? It doesn't matter. You just completed some course of study. You got a certificate. All those that took the workshop yesterday got a certificate. Right? Doesn't mean you're certified. It means you completed that workshop. So just like to make sure everybody's on the same page and understanding what the differences are. So when we're looking at certification, we tend to break this down into 2 categories. We have technical certification and we have professional. So technical is going to come out of those vendors, like Esri, Microsoft, Autodesk, even some open source with QGIS. Professional certification is going to come out GISCI, ASPRS, IAAO, the Property Mapping Association of North Carolina has a professional certification, right? What's the difference? Why do I want to get one versus the other? Well, it really depends on where you're at. Technical certification usually has no minimum experience requirements, which means you can go to the website, like Esri's website, go to the certification page, schedule an exam, pay the money, and you have never seen the software at all. They don't care. They will take your money. You can go sit for the exam. If you pass, which I doubt you would, but if you do, you are now certified. Right? And really what this certification does is say that you, and honestly you'll never, if you've never touched Esri software, you will not pass one of their certification exams, unless you get really, really lucky. But it says you know how to use that specific platform. You know what the vendor says is best practices and what tools should be used when. So listen, it just demonstrates you have a certain skill with that vendor platform. Okay? Your professional base is just that. It's not saying that you are proficient in any one platform, because you may actually know a lot of them. What it does say, though, is you've worked in the field a certain amount of time, and perform certain duties over the course of that time frame, and should have a general knowledge of the theories and best practices behind that profession. What are the general knowledge areas? Rebecca mentioned those KSAs for the GISP. It's not which button in ArcMap do I press to go to the full extent. It's not even what tool, geoprocessing tool do I use to project data. It's more like, what is the purpose of a datum? That's the kind of questions you'll see that those professional type exams do. So what this does show is that you have a lot broader, or should have a broad base of experience, hopefully with multiple technologies, but at the core you understand the basic concepts. You're not, if you may be an Esri user, but if I give you QGIS, you should be able to have enough core knowledge to be able to work through that one as well. Okay? But then it also shows a dedication to the profession as a whole. Okay? So why do you want to go through all this? Well, big, simple, all those things Rebecca said. You know, it builds you up within the profession. You might make more money. You might have an easier time landing a job. But more importantly, it just sets you up within that profession as somebody that cares, somebody that's a leader, somebody that is taking time in themselves to continue their own professional development. Okay? If you're getting into this, hopefully you care about yourself. Because in a profession where things are changing so fast, like when I first got into this, 20 plus, the 1990s time frame, really, when I got, it was all about digitizing. How do we take paper and convert it into digital information? Now we don't have to do that much anymore. It's all about, we have more information than we know how to handle. How do we control that? How do we manage that? How do we disseminate that properly? How do we aggregate it? All of that is a whole different skill set. And now we're getting UAVs out there, of course, continuous uses of LiDAR and so on. So that professional development becomes a critical component of all of that. So what kinds of questions can you expect? Whether it's a professional exam or a technical certification exam. Well, Rebecca hit on a couple of these, but you don't forget to get all true and false. I have had those on exams. Those are nice because you have a 50-50 chance. Even if you don't know, you can guess and maybe get it right. Okay. But, so we like those. Multiple choice, right? So we have multiple choice answers on there. Now, a couple of things with these, some tips. Okay, so first off with the true and false, watch for gotcha words. We'll talk about those more in a minute. But usually with those, it sounds simple, but they'll throw one little word in there that'll change the whole meaning. And if you miss that one little trick word, you're liable to pick the wrong one. Multiple choice and multiple answer. A lot of these will go into scenario-based questions. So they'll feed you some scenario. Something like, you've received data from an outside source. It claims it's in the North Carolina State Flame projection using the NAT83 data. When you bring it into your data, it appears far to the west. However, it seems to be the same scale. Which of the following might be the reason that's happening? And A, projection is improperly assigned. B, units are improperly assigned. And so on. And then you'll have to read through that. Now, one of the other things they like to do with scenario-based questions is put a whole lot of extra junk in there that you don't need. And you have to kind of fish through and figure out what is the pertinent data in that question to answer what it's actually asking. So take the time. You need to read all that. Also, with the multiple answer, they may or may not tell you how many you need to choose. Now, GISP, do they tell you how many? Okay. So when you go and take the GISP exam, if they have a multiple, they select all that apply. They're not going to tell you, oh, choose 3, or choose 4, or choose 2. You have to know. Now, when you take, say, for example, the Esri exams, they will actually tell you, select the 2 that apply. So that's something to pay attention to. Okay? Some good general tips as you're preparing for these. Like me, when I started taking a lot of these, I was already out of school, been out of school for a while. I kind of forgotten what it takes to study for an exam. So we want to look at things. First, don't just think because you've worked in that field for the last 20 years that you don't need to study. Go look at those knowledge areas, those KSAs for the GISP, the knowledge areas that Esri references for theirs, the ones for ASPRS. Go and look at them and check them against your experience. Okay? GISP is testing on the full breadth of the GIS. That includes programming, field data collection, processing, analysis, data design. If all you do is data editing all day long, you may be the best data editor out there. But you need to know these other things if you're going to get your GISP. The same with the Esri certifications. You're going to go get your ArcGIS Desktop Associate. And all you do is convert data. Okay? Well, what about cartography? Changing symbology? What about editing data, analyzing the data? You know, there's a whole breadth of capability in there that it's going to fetch you. It's not just the Desktop Associate for data editors. It's the whole platform. Okay? And I can tell you, as somebody that does instruction on ArcGIS Desktop, there's a slew of stuff. I find stuff in there all the time that even after teaching the stuff for 15 years or so, that's in there? When did they have that? Okay. Get any study aid. If they list any books, go back and get them. And especially for Esri or any of the vendor certifications, Microsoft or whatever, if you've taken any official training from them, go back to those exercises. Go back to those books, because those are going to have the best practices as the vendor thinks they are. I can almost guarantee that if you work within your shop with Esri or QG or whatever it happens to be, that you do things that aren't what the vendor says should be the way you do it. Because you had to have a workaround for some other thing, or you didn't even take official training, you just figured out that's work and that's how you do it. Okay? With these exams, it's not about, especially on the technical ones, it's not about how you do it in your shop. It's how the vendor thinks you should do it. So make sure you take a chance to look through those books. Get them. Find others that have taken the exam. I'll tell you, when you go take, whether it's GISP or Esri or whatever, when you take the exam, you have to agree to an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. It says you're not allowed to go tell everybody what's on the exam. Okay? That is a legal document, and they can't come after you if they find you giving away test questions and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean you can't help provide some general guidance to somebody. Go find somebody. Hey, am I really looking right? Did you have a source that you used that really helped you? Yeah, absolutely, do that. You can find a practice exam. Now, for GISP, I don't know of any practice exams out there. There are a few for Esri. I know I have some I've created for classes I teach. So go find those. For the Microsoft certifications, I guarantee you can find practice exams that are almost identical to the ones you will see on the real test. I hesitate to say this, but I'm going to. I can tell you, I went through the certification practice exams, took a bunch of them to the point that I had them memorized. Went in and took the actual Microsoft exam and went, hey, I remember that, except in this question they had it as Billy and Bob instead of Jane and Trip. They just changed. It's like, I remember, okay, so that was D. Okay, not that we want to get that way, but you can find them. Okay? Check your lingo, especially on the technical certifications. How many people know what the definition of a feature class is? Yes, sir.
Feature class is a table in the database that has
Okay. I'm not going to be mean, but you're wrong. In Esri terms, a feature class, the definition they use, is any collection of features that shares the same geometry, the same attribute table, and the same spatial reference. So does a shapefile store a feature class? It does. How many does it store? 1. So don't think that a feature class is just limited to geodatabase, because you may get a question, possibly, I can either confirm or deny that something like this may or may not be on the exam. Could be, which of the following data formats can store multiple feature classes? Coverage, shapefile, geodatabase, DWG, DGN. Which one of those that I list did not store multiple feature classes? The shapefile. All of the others. Coverages, for anybody that remembers them. Geodatabase, DWGs, DGNs, all store multiple feature classes. Notice DGN, DWG, not even Esri formats. But in Esri speak, Esri lingo, they store multiple feature classes. So make sure you know the lingo. So don't feel that most everybody in the industry, except Esri's exam, when you talk about feature classes, talk about the geodatabase. But when you go to take that exam, just know that that can not be the case, right? So make flashcards, go through them. Make sure you know that terminology. It trips more people up than you would think, okay? Make sure you review those training materials, walk through those, look through the help for best practice, okay? If you're taking a specific software, go to the help. It tells you how to do things by the vendor. That's the way they want you to do it. Right? Make sure you check through the help on things. Any tutorials they have online. Right? The Esri Crest books, whatnot, do that. Review any white papers from the vendor. All good things to do. Okay? Before the exam, do not overcram, especially for those of us that are not 20-something years old anymore. Those nights of staying up all night, cramming into the exam is just not going to do it. I've got to have a good, 6, 8, 9 hours of sleep before I'm any good. If you don't know it by then, you're probably not going to pass anyway. So take the time. Get a good night's sleep. The next great thing about all of these certification exams is you get to pick when you go take it. It's not the professor saying, yes, you have to be here at 7:30 in the morning. Well, what? Pick the time when you're at your best. If you know you're not a morning person, don't sign up to take a morning exam. If you know you are a morning person because you're up at 4:30 in the morning, and I think you're crazy, then go take that morning exam. Pick the time when you're going to be at your best when you do that. Okay? When you actually sit down for the exam, this is a great method I use. I call it the 3-pass method. You have 4 hours or whatever it is for the given exam, 2.5 hours or whatever. Use all of that time. You don't get a special certification for being the first one finished. Okay? So take the time. Do a first pass through. Review all of the questions. Anyone you know without a doubt, answer. All the others that you, maybe, I'm not sure, or God, I have no idea. Hit those later. And most of all of these exams, you can go through and mark questions and go back until you hit the submit button. Once you hit the submit button, all bets are off, and I'm sorry, that's what it is, right? So come down to the second pass through. Any of those questions that you've narrowed it down, so it's either this or this, and answer those. Typically go with your gut. I can't tell you how many students I've had, and not even the certification, but quizzes I've given, that we actually go through and review them. Like, dang it, I picked that one first and changed it. Dang it. Go with your gut. In most cases, you're right. You just overthink it too much as you sit there. Well, it could be that. How do you go with your gut? Best thing I can tell you. And then lastly, anyone you have no idea, answer. Because in most all of these, if you don't answer it, it's wrong. So you might as well put some. You might get lucky. So, as I said, they love to put trick words in there. Things that will change entire meanings of the question. So watch out for these. Most, least, best, minimum, maximum. Talking about Esri, they look at, you are working in an SDE environment and have to edit data in an enterprise geodatabase. What is the maximum licensing level you would need to have ArcGIS Desktop in order to maintain that data? Basic, standard, advanced, ArcGIS Pro, something else. What would be the answer to that? You know? What was that? Well, the answer is advanced because it said what is the maximum license level you would need. If they said the minimum licensing level, it would be standard. So, or which of the following is the best method for doing X, Y, Z? So best method, which usually means you'll look through the answers and there'll be at least 2, if not 3 methods that would accomplish the task. Which one's best? That's where you got to go back to what is the best practices. What does the vendor think is the best way to do it? Or what is the professional best practice for said operations? Okay? Not what you do in your office. Because I can almost guarantee that what you do in your office is not always what somebody else thinks is the best practice. I'm not saying what you do is wrong. I'm not saying what you do is not a best practice. I'm saying from an industry or vendor perspective, it might not be how they say is the way you should do it. Okay? So watch that. These words can completely change the meaning of any question. And usually what happens, you skim through it and say, oh, what's the licensing level needed to edit in ArcGIS? Oh, that's standard. And it was maximum licensing. Change, whole meaning changed. So be careful about that. Okay? If you're taking technical exams, remember you are limited to a single solution. So if you have a process in your office where you take data and you export it out to Excel spreadsheets and then do something else, and you're taking the Esri certification exam, saying take it to Excel is almost never the right answer. Or take data from the SDE and go into the SQL backend, and I'm using SQL tools to do no, not Esri, you got to use the Esri, right? So make sure you know what those best practices are, what things you're doing, and like I said, if it says go out to something else, almost 90% of the time, going to something else is the wrong answer. Okay? So, any questions? Comments? Speak now or forever hold peace.
I think that was just one more, just they're going to want
Well, absolutely.
going to send you out
Yep.
What study materials are there for the GIS?
That's a good question, and right now there's almost none official. There are many that are being worked on at GIS Pro in Jacksonville this year. We have a whole track that is going to be dedicated to the GISP, understanding the portfolio process, discussions about the knowledge areas on the exam to help educate. We're hoping, speaking for ERISA, we have a goal of developing a series of workshops that can be done at conferences like this or as webinars that may hopefully eventually become a study guide at some point. But it's still, as Rebecca said, it's very much in its infancy, and we're still trying to, it takes a lot to pull all that together.
Let me just add, again, it is a new exam, and this is the usual type of trajectory. What we will be doing over time is as we retire questions from the item bank, we will spin them off as practice exams. Right now, there's a document on the website. It's only about 10 to 12 pages. It's called the Candidate Manual. It tells you what all to expect. It tells you the types of references that you would want to listen to study. And it will say, for example, a standard GIS info textbook. There are, 4 or 5 of them. We're not going to call out one specifically, but because it's core technical knowledge, It doesn't matter if you use Clark or whoever, it's basic knowledge that will be there. Also, the Geotech Center is developing some resources where you can kind of self-test yourself on GIS basics. It's in general, I think that they will develop pointers to the KSAs for the GISP exam. So those are the major things available right now.
The Geotech Center,
Yeah.
yeah, it's Google Geotech Center. They're a foundation that helps develop GIS curriculum for two-year colleges.
And there's one more wiki kind of document that's out there. One of the candidates who took the December 15 exam, he went through the blueprint, KSA by KSA, and he developed all these study notes, and he has shared them.
It's on Reddit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on Reddit. You can Google your way into the GISP exam. And he initially shared that out, and as I understand, other people have been going to that site now. It's a Google Doc. They've all been added to it. So it's kind of a community help thing.
For the answer technical exams, I know you can't, I guess, tell us, but can you give us a range of how many questions is on that exam?
It's 95 questions.
Okay.
For the true debate exams are bigger, but yeah, 95 questions. You have 2.5 hours. Yes.
Kind of hard for Rebecca, but, you know, like the pass rate on exams, or how many people like take a portfolio but don't pass, you know?
I know. GISCI is not releasing that yet, but they will soon. I think their feeling right now is they want to make sure that they have a representative sample size. So you can begin with the portfolio or the exam, but you can't ultimately be certified until you meet portfolio requirements. So you can take the exam and pass it, but if you're right out of school, and actually they kind of recommend it, take it while you're good at taking the exam. You can take the exam right now, out of school, your senior year, but you got to be careful. You have 6 years. You still have to attain 4 years experience to meet the portfolio requirements.
Any other questions? Yes.
And for Rebecca, I guess, for the experience part for the portfolio, is that 4 years or 40 hours of just GIS?
It's 4-year equivalent.
Yes, it's a 4-year FTE, full-time equivalency. So, yes, working 40 hours a week, 4 years. So, yeah. So.
You just have to be careful you don't double charge. You know, there's a practicum related to a course, and of course, you can't also help this. But the executive director is very helpful if you have questions about exactly how to do things.
And just so y'all know that later this year, I can't remember the exact date, I can look it up later if anybody's interested, I will be back up here in Cary doing a GISP application exam workshop. It goes over all the requirements for the application, the portfolio. We'll talk a little bit about some of the same things we talked about with the exam, but it's basically a 6 to 8 hour workshop that we'll be doing here through the North Carolina Public Works Association. Yeah, it's weird it's through Public Works and not.
When is that?
I don't remember the exact date. If you'll give me later, I can try to pull it up on my calendar.
Pardon me, covered this as a session jumper, but are you going to have to take the exam for recertification?
No.
Once you have the GISP, you're always GISP, no, unless you let it lapse. If you let it lapse, then yes, you would have to read.
And you know at this time, that's what the board has said for the foreseeable future. Doesn't mean that a future board 10 years from now might change their
You
mind.
still have to do the points qualification.
Yeah, you still have the whole.
Yeah.
Education and all that.
You just have, yeah,
As long as you don't let it lapse.
right.
Correct.
See what's up.
Yeah.
We ready for the next time to turn it over?
Man, if everybody has,
Okay, so we're
Don't
going to turn it
questions.
over to our next presenter on GIS and surveying stuff, and that's, I'm kind of excited about. So.
all right.